Welcome, sacred travelers. If you are here, you're not someone who is simply passing through life. You're someone who senses the deeper layers beneath what is visible and who knows that your path is asking more of you. And today's conversation is a little different. It is softer, quieter, but incredibly precise because we're stepping into the art of noticing. The moments that don't look extraordinary and yet carry the exact turning points of life. Please welcome with me Douglas Brouwer, a Presbyterian pastor and writer. And having served congregations across the U.S. and Europe, including Zurich, which is close to where I am, he returned to Europe in retirement to serve as an interim pastor in The Hague in the Netherlands. And he is also the author of seven nonfiction books, including his most recent one, The Traveler's Path, that I'm sure that we will touch on in this conversation. Welcome, Doug. What an interesting biography.
Well, you make me sound pretty good. Thank you for that introduction.
Well, that's what it is. And, when I go through that, I'm really curious, like, how has living in different countries, speaking different languages, and meeting people of all sorts of backgrounds deepened your faith?
I have to answer that question by starting with my childhood. My parents gave me a wonderful gift when I was growing up. Every summer, we set off on road trips, and we covered all of North America on these long road trips. So in looking back, I wasn't aware at the time, of course, but looking back, I received the gift of curiosity from my father in particular. I found out from after my father passed away, my mother explained that it was all my dad who wanted to do these things. So I've continued that. I inherited that curious spirit, and throughout my life, I've wanted to discover other lands and peoples, and yeah. And then a couple of years ago, I decided I needed to write about this experience.
That is already very deep.
Okay.
So, one of the things that you have shared with me before this conversation, and I love that because, I do most, if not all of my work in English, and I have detached a little bit from the German language, but there is a few words in the German language that I agree that are really super beautiful. And you shared with me that one of your favorite German words is Sehnsucht. So tell us a little bit about that. Like, what does that evoke in you?
So I think this curiosity I have is partly genetic. I think that scientists have discovered that there is a gene in a small portion of the population which pushes us out, and it may be the reason why people left Africa millions of years ago and explored the rest of the globe. I'm not altogether sure about that, but there is a genetic component to this. But I think there's also a spiritual component, and the word you use, and I'm learning how to pronounce it from you, Sehnsucht, describes the spiritual yearning we have. In English, the best definition I've had comes from C.S. Lewis, who says, inside of us, there is this inconsolable longing for we know not what. And I think that describes what I have.
Mm.
I yearn to explore and discover, but I'm never sure quite what I'm after. Is it and it's still here. I'm not young anymore, but I still have this yearning to discover as much as I can about the world around me.
Have you found that in others too? I mean, I can just imagine, when you have that profession, which I'm sure that is also a purpose, like a mission in a way, and you go around the globe literally and see all kinds of people, all sorts of color, but there is this one, and probably more than one, but like connection that brings everybody together.
Not everyone has it. I have two sisters uh, who took these same road trips with me, and yet they've lived most of their lives within a few kilometers of where they grew up. They seem to be happy, well-adjusted people, but they do not have this desire to go. Uh, do you know where I've discovered this quality in other people is on pilgrimage? I've walked a few pilgrimages now in recent years, and I'll meet people from all over the world. Few Americans, believe it or not, but people from just about every continent. And when I meet them, I discover that they have the same urge to set out and discover who and what is out there.
It's beautiful that you bring up pilgrimage because I feel that this is such a profound experience where we not just internally, but also externally, like embark on this quest to pursue Sehnsucht.
Yes, yeah, yeah. Yeah. I'm so on my first pilgrimage across northern Spain. It's the Camino de Santiago. I met a man from Chile who was a Jesuit priest, as it turned out, and he was living in Siberia. I mean,
Wow.
there in itself is a story. And I said, "Oh, didn't you have to agree to that?" And he said, "No, my superior sent me, and so I went." And I think he was doing this pilgrimage as a kind of sabbatical from his work in Siberia. But that was just one story among dozens of compelling, interesting people from around the world. And so we would walk, and I would listen, and I would discover that my world is far bigger than I ever imagined.
Take us into that world. What were the main discoveries?
Well, Julia, to understand why this is such a big issue for me, I, I have to explain where I came from. I grew up in quite a narrow. Of course, this is true for lots of people, I suppose, but I grew up in a narrow environment, religiously, theologically, and I've spent my entire life since then discovering that there's a world beyond where I grew up. And I'm so grateful for that. I'm grateful for where I grew up and the gifts that it provided me. But I'm also in reaction to that. That surely there's more to this world than what I was given as a child. So I've spent my entire adulthood doing that. And then for me, I've listened to a number of your podcasts, and I think we go about this in slightly different ways. But this has been my way to discover people and personalities and cultures through conversation, through asking questions. How do you see the world? How do you experience the world? And that has opened my own. It's certainly opened my own mind.
How do you stay open and present in these moments, especially when, you find maybe yourself in a conversation where you don't agree or you have a different viewpoint?
Wow, that is an excellent question. And looking back to my pilgrimage experience, I don't think I've met anyone so far with whom I've been in disagreement. There have been annoying people, people who get up too early and make a lot of noise before I'm ready to get up, and there's that. But I've never met anyone with whom I was in profound disagreement. If anything, I've expressed wonder at their different points of view. And interestingly, I've had more disagreement with people I've grown up with.
Oh, I know that one.
I mean, those are the people I tend to argue with, but no, not on pilgrimage. That's just I mean, so far anyway, it's been a source of constant wonder.
I'd be curious, because I've like actually talked to a few people about the Camino. So when you go on pilgrimage, is this merely something that you do for your own, or do you also always like see yourself in the role of the pastor when you come across other people and like this consultation and support? Because it's difficult to like put that aside, I imagine.
So Yeah, I want to answer that in two different ways. I have spent a good part of my life taking groups of people, and I think you do this as well. I've taken groups of people all over the world, and we've explored, and the truth of the matter is that's hard work.
Yeah,
Maybe you've
I agree.
discovered this. It's far harder than I expected, and I would spend a great deal of my time tending to the needs of the people who were in my care. So in later years, I've decided I'm going to do a few of these on my own. and not have to care for a group of people. I'm just going to experience it on my own. And that has been wonderful. I think there was a second part to that, but what I wanted to say was this grew out of being tired out from having to care for groups of people. I mean, I've gotten to know hospitals in foreign capitals because
Oh,
members of my group would get sick, right? Yeah, so I don't have to do any of that when I'm on my own.
yes. Yes.
And but I have to hurry up and say I would do all of those trips over again, even though they were hard work, even though I didn't explore as much as I wanted to. They were all wonderful.
I wonder, like, I went through some of your writings on Substack, and I really love the way how you describe these, yeah, like your relation with life and the relation with people. And I feel that in your writing, there is a deep reverence also for the unnoticed moments in life. And also, when we go on pilgrimage or we have that spiritual longing within us, we always like strive for these big aha moments. I already see you shaking your head. I like that. So tell us a little bit about these unnoticed. Where can we find God in these unnoticed moments?
I would say that they nearly always take us by surprise. It they never occur. I hate to use absolute language like that, but I think they never occur where we expect them. It's when we're taken by surprise that we have a new way of looking at the world. On one of my first visits to the Middle East, I met a Palestinian Christian for the first time. It's a very small part of the population. But I thought, why haven't I heard this story before? And I've kept up the relationship now for a few decades, but his story continues to, well, it blows my mind to be honest. But there must be stories like that in every part of the globe that I just have never heard before. And yes, so my motivation for going is always to make those discoveries. And I wouldn't have known before I left that that would be a life-changing time for me.
Pilgrimage is not tourism. It's a conversation between your feet, your soul, and the earth. When you walk for days, whether on the Camino or any other sacred path, something begins to fall away. The roads, the noise, the timelines, you just become simpler, more honest, more porous, and in that simplicity, something ancient and primordial awakens within you. What I have learned is that no two pilgrimages are the same. Even if we walk the same trail, each soul travels very differently. Some are called into silence, some are called into devotion, some into healing or lineage, some into a quiet remembering of who they have always been. And if you've ever felt that pull, that longing for a journey that changes you from the inside, I have created something for you. The Sacred Travel Quiz helps you understand how your soul naturally journeys, not to label you, but to illuminate the path that is already whispering your name and the sacred sites that are calling your soul home. If pilgrimage or sacred travel lives in your heart, you'll find the link in the show notes to take the quiz and find out your sacred travel style.
You want to hear others.
I was like, shall I ask him to tell the story, to tell the actual story? Would you be open to that?
Yes, and I don't know if I don't know exactly who your listeners are, but I'll tell you this much, that this man, this Palestinian Christian I met, had a vision for peace. He's been
Mm.
nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize several times, but he started a school, and the school is for Jews and Muslims, Christians, and Druze. And he has a very simple slogan. It's that children learn peace on their desktops.
Mm.
So if they can go to school together, learn the same subjects together, that they might be able to live together in peace. Well, what a compelling, what a compelling thought. And since that first encounter with him, well, he's not only expanded his school, he started the first Arab university in northern Israel. He, he he's changed the way I think about the relationships between different cultures, right? And I've stayed in contact with him. I've brought more groups to see him, and I've raised money for his school. I think meeting him taught me in a way what being a pastor was really all about.
That's profound.
One more comment about that. He's a pacifist. His father once said to him, "No guns, Elias, no guns." So he's a pacifist, but that does not imply, it doesn't mean that he is a weak or passive person. He is one of the strongest people I've ever met, but it's an inner strength. When you encounter him, you listen to his words and you take him seriously. It's quite unexpected.
That actually like leads me to asking, because I read in your latest, I think it was your latest Substack article, you wrote something about that you cry a lot. And I found that so like heart opening to read that from a man.
Mhm.
And to state that out there, and I just feel it's a segue from when you just speak about like peace and strength and inner strength, and like what showing our emotions and admitting our emotions, how can that teach us inner strength?
Well, this is going in a direction that I didn't anticipate going. I was raised in the home of a World War II veteran, and my father was a strong man, but he fit the profile of that generation.
Yeah.
Strong, didn't show emotion, and he had this son who cried easily, but he didn't put me down for it. He didn't judge me for it. He didn't know what to do with it, but he also made space for it, which in hindsight, very much appreciate. So in adulthood, I've tried to understand where these deep feelings come from, and part of it's genetic. I think scientists find that 15 to 20% of the population have this propensity to cry easily, and I'm one of them. So what happens is that I'll see something beautiful. I'll hear a beautiful symphony, or I'll find myself in a place somewhere on the earth which is overwhelming in its beauty, and my first reaction is to be overwhelmed, overcome, and the tears are right there. And it's because my body has no other way of processing what's going on within me. And I'm grateful that I finally reached this age. The Substack post you read had to do with my grandson, who apparently he inherited this trait, and his parents aren't sure what to do with it. And I want to assure them that it's a gift. It's not
Yeah.
something to be managed. He's been given a wonderful gift, and I'll start crying right now.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And what a beautiful guide he has with you by his side for that.
I hope well, as with most grandchildren, you don't appreciate that until many years later, but one day I hope he appreciates that.
There are so much I feel, and that's why also, I enjoy talking to elders, and I mean that in a very respectful way, because I feel there is so much, especially in these times, where we need that wisdom and we need that reflected strength to come back to ourselves, and like closing the loop to what you said about the peace, the peacemakers, the peace holders,
Mm.
and yeah, like this is what the times are asking from us. So you also speak a lot about like relations, connecting with people. How has that taught you that there's always a bridge over separation?
Well, that's been a big part of my work over the years, caring for people, being with people. And I have to say, it's not been the easiest part of my work either over the years. Being a pastor to a large group of people has been challenging. And I was relieved in some ways to retire from it. It's an enormous responsibility. But as you say, I have spent a large part of my life trying to connect people, trying to hear both sides of an issue. And I think I've been successful in in some situations, and maybe not so successful in others. But I hope I've always set an example of how to be present in the midst of conflict, how to make sure that all voices are heard, even those the softer ones. I've seen that as my responsibility, even when I didn't agree with those other voices. I thought it was important that they be heard. So I want to bring it back to our topic. So when I was living not far from you in and working in Zurich, I served a church that was made up of more than 24 nationalities and language groups.
Wow.
What we had in common was that we spoke English. Well, okay. Also, we had the same faith, but we had very, very little in common beyond that. And I found those years to be among the most challenging of my life. I would encounter a person from a different culture, and I would think, is this person just being difficult, or is he or she expressing what's, I don't know, common to his or her background? Because first impression is, well, you're just being difficult.
Mhm,
Why are you so
mhm.
hard to get along with? But then often, most of the time, I would try to listen behind that and understand where that's coming from. What is it about your background that leads you to speak and interact in that way? So my years in Zurich were some of the most formative and not always easy, some of the most formative of my life.
Tell us your secret. How do we listen behind?
Oh, oh, that's a wonderful question, Julia. I don't think I've ever tried to name it. I think part of it has to do with the curiosity. If we're not curious about another culture or about another human being, we'll never get very far. But what I think there has to be a love, and not romantic love, but a genuine regard for another. In Christian terms, we'd say someone else is created in the image and likeness of God. So
Mhm.
I want to see that in you and recognize it. And it's very difficult because our that image is distorted and it gets scarred over the years. We bury it, but we have to work very hard to try to see it in other people. This is wonderful. I think you're pushing me to understand some things. Good for you.
I mean, it's good for both of us, I guess. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for sharing with us. And, I just like really before coming on this conversation, I was on the phone with my best friend, and she's French Lebanese. And there's so much going on. And we cried a lot on the call as well, like both of us. So I feel there's even just energetically like this beautiful thread of, yeah, how can we make space for each other and how can we understand and, yeah, be the bridge builders and be the peacemakers.
It's hard work, and it seems to be getting harder all the time. I have to be honest. This is a hard time in which to be a peacemaker and a bridge builder.
So I'm curious, in these hard times, and we all have them, whether it's personal or also collective, would you share with us maybe an aspect or a ritual in your faith that you always come back to that has kept you going?
So I was I at the beginning I mentioned that I was raised in kind of a narrow tradition, and it was narrow because it was intellectual. Having faith or a spiritual life was something you thought about and argued about and wrote books about, but it was never experienced. So over the course of my life, I've become much more experiential about my faith and beliefs. And we do have rituals in my tradition, but I don't think I'd ever really embrace them in that way. Again, rituals were something you thought about. You thought deeply about them. But rituals are also well, they're far more than that. And when we participate in them, we feel connections to other people. I'll give you. I'll tell you. It's a funny story, but there's a deep meaning here. My first baptism by immersion occurred in Lake Zurich, not far from where you live. And a young woman from Africa asked one day to be baptized, and she wanted
Mhm.
to be immersed in Lake Zurich. And I had To be honest, I'd never done that. In my tradition, we sprinkle babies.
Yeah, yeah.
It's clean and neat and no fuss. So I had to watch, here's the funny part, I had to watch a YouTube video to learn how to do an immersion baptism. So one spring day, Nadia and I waded out into Lake Zurich and I baptized her, and she came out of the water shouting and screaming as though it was the happiest day of her life. And it may well have been. I thought that was a transforming moment for me too. I saw this ritual in a new way.
Hmm.
I said, what happened just then that would cause her to react in that way? And it was the water. It was the temperature of the water. It was the act of going under and then out again. I think in that moment, I experienced baptism in an entirely new way.
Oh, how
And we'll never forget
beautiful.
her.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. And thanks for sharing that with us. I think it's like this is again a moment to come back into when we are in presence and in that relationship. There is always something for us in the situation and in the constellation that unfolds as well.
Yes. I did not learn that when I was growing up. I learned how to be critical of other ways of doing things. So other ways of doing things were wrong or questionable. And it's only been in adulthood that I've discovered there are many ways to do the things that I've always done. And my way is often not the right way. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to segue a little bit from here into braiding sweetgrass because you mentioned that in the beginning that you wanted to speak about that. And I was actually reflecting on your own writing and what you're bringing up now, like, and how does that go together with the book? And you're going to tell us the story, like why you felt inspired to speak about it. But you talked a lot about that for you it's been merely like in the head, or like concepts that are spoken about, that are written about, rather than really coming from an embodied perspective. And I feel a lot of the things that are talked about in braiding sweetgrass, like literally the act of braiding itself also, it drops down into the body, and it's where this relationship really becomes a lived experience. So what touched you deeply about this book?
So 2 years ago, my older daughter gave me this book and said, "Dad, this is really good. I want you to read it." And I have to admit that in the first few pages, I thought, this is not for me. I can't believe she gave me this book. But it grew on me, and it grew on me for reasons you're mentioning. This is a Native American or an indigenous way of looking at the world, and so faith or spirituality becomes tangible as you, I don't know, as you hold the sweetgrass. There is a scent. It's apparently a vanilla. There's kind of a strong vanilla scent from the sweetgrass. It can be molded into shapes, often baskets. It's used in, I'm not sure what these sponging ceremonies. It burns. The
Hmm.
sweetgrass burns. A whole world opened to me by reading this book, a world that I might not have thought much about before. But the central theme is this sweetgrass, a different way of understanding spirituality. So my older daughter is a Presbyterian pastor too, but she's way ahead of me in appreciating other wisdom that comes from other traditions. Right? And that's what I got from this book.
Okay, there is a question forming. Let me give me
But
give me a moment. I really feel that, and I'm really grateful for having come across your work, and that we kind of have this conversation, because again, like the openness and the space that you create to hold for different traditions or viewpoints or beliefs, we don't always find that in a religious context. And I'm curious to see how, what has, you talked a little bit about your background, but what are really what's the essence of how we when we are being confronted with a viewpoint that might not reflect our own, or maybe even perceivably like stand against it, how do we not feel threatened in our own identity and perception of life?
I think the secret to that has been, as we've already discussed, my travel experience. Putting myself in a place of vulnerability, putting myself in a new culture, a place where I didn't know the language, a place where I didn't know my way around. I had to ask for help a couple of times when I lived close to where you live in Switzerland. I had to make use of the healthcare in that area. That is the very definition of vulnerability, I think. I went to the emergency department because I didn't feel well. So I learned a great deal in that experience by being vulnerable. I think too often when we stay home, when we don't venture out into new places, that the opportunities to be vulnerable shrink. They're just not there. So I encourage travel. I encourage exploration as a way of putting ourselves in places where we can be changed. It's worked for me. As I said, I've got two sisters who seem to be perfectly healthy and well adjusted, and they don't go anywhere. They would disagree with that, but they certainly haven't gone as many places as I have. But for me, this has been the key to find a place where I'm not in charge, not the authority, and then in that place I can learn from the people around me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. And
Is it?
I want to push again a little bit. You're like, I can feel it already. I agree 100% to that. And at the same time, I also feel that there is, I want to say, a need to come back to embrace also the indigenous wisdom on the land that we live on. So I'm curious what that book sparked for you in terms of inspiration.
Well, in some ways, it was a repeat of a process that I go through all the time. My first reaction when I was handed the book was, that's not for me. What do I need indigenous wisdom for? But okay, this was a gift for my daughter. Okay, that number one, I'm going to read this because she found it important. And then as I made my way into it, I realized that there was something that I could learn. But I don't know if this is an answer to your question, but for me anyway, it's overcoming those early objections. Oh, eh, this is not anything that's going to be helpful to me. And then slowly I discovered that, yes, there's a great deal I could learn here. And sadly, the older I get, that first urge has not diminished. The first
Ah!
urge is still to be dismissive, but I've learned that it is an urge that I do need to look beyond that.
Thank you. Thank you. And we're going to be putting the link in the show notes for the book for everybody who feels curious and hasn't read it or listened to it yet. But then I also want to ask you about your own book, the latest one, The Traveler's Path. That's what it's called, right? So, yes, please show us. Take us a little bit into the themes of that book.
So because I have this, I have to take this back. I gave a shout out to my older daughter. My younger daughter was actually the inspiration for this book. We were sitting in a coffee shop in The Hague. She had come to visit me during my year there. And I had just finished my memoir and was thinking about a new writing project. So younger daughter says, well, Dad, I mean, this is how they begin every conversation. Dad, it's obvious, isn't it? You've traveled. Here we are in the Netherlands. You've spent your whole life doing this. It's time you reflected on that. So with that encouragement, daughters always sound the same when they give fathers encouragement. With that encouragement, I began the reflecting process. And as it turns out, there was a great deal there. Not only going places, but art figures prominently in the book, as you may imagine, public art especially. language learning as a way of getting to know another culture, the importance of language learning, and maybe a few others. Oh, yeah, the book describes mission trips, and mission trips have come under serious criticism for good reason. But I've done a fair amount of it, and I reflect on that in the book and what I learned and what I would do differently the next time. Yeah, thank you for asking about the book.
Well, absolutely. So mission trips. Let's talk mission trips.
Okay. Okay.
What would you do differently today?
I think we did a pretty good job on the ones I went on. We were not the white saviors going into other communities. We tried to come alongside the people we were working with. I'll give you an example. I took a group of people to the Philippines on a Habitat for Humanity build. This was a Jimmy Carter build in the Philippines. And there were several hundred Americans who came, but there were several thousand Filipinos who were working alongside us. So I think what makes me feel okay about that experience is that this was genuinely a collaborative experience. We were working together. We were trying to get to know each other in the process. Uh, Do I feel 100% okay about that? No. I sometimes think that the money we spent on plane travel, the money we spent on food and lodging could probably have been better used right there. We could have given this to the local leadership. On the other hand, often what happens on these mission trips is that I'm changed more than the people we visit. I discover new cultures, new ways of thinking about things. I'm trying to think of a even better example of that. Well, I went to South Africa one time, and the purpose of the trip was to dig a freshwater well in a village that didn't have fresh water. And I was invited to preach in the local church on Sunday. Well, the freshwater well became secondary for all of us, the people we visited, the people from the US who came to visit. The freshwater well was soon forgotten. What I'm going to cry now. What was most important on that visit was the relationships that were developed.
Mm.
People from vastly different cultures coming together in mutual appreciation, unforgettable. So, yes, they got fresh water. I'm so glad. But but we made lifelong friendships.
Yeah, yeah. And that's also thank you. I wanna encourage that. It's beautiful.
My family finds it annoying.
I feel you. I'm one of those too, so No, but it's also, like, coming back to what you said earlier, like, how can we go not behind, but this is more, like, beyond the actual reason. Thank you.
I think it takes well, you lead groups, so I'm going to put the responsibility on you. I think often the leader has to be the first one to say, "Do you notice this? Are you aware of that this is going on?" So we can point the way, and not everybody in the group is going to catch on right away. But I think the leader of groups like that plays a very important role, and it helps if you have as a leader, it helps if you have a curious spirit.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. When you were speaking, I thought about, it's not so different from people leading spiritual tours to different parts in the world right now. So, like, yeah, still being open and also holding that mutual respect and responsibility for the land that we go to, for the people that we visit.
I, s- I've listened to you long enough to now to know that I think that's how your tours or your travels unfold. I think that's part of how you do it. Even the breathing exercises we did before the podcast started were your way of helping me to enter into this space. So it was very invitational. Yeah, I think you do it.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, this has been a wonderful conversation. I have so many more questions. We'll see if we do a round two. But I just want to open up the field if there's any final wisdom that you want to share with the audience.
Our conversation, I think, is a perfect example of what I've been trying to say all along. I think you and I come at this topic or this subject from such different perspectives, and yet I have discovered such similarities. The I've been so grateful to get to know you and to get to know your work. And I'm glad for this.
Thank you. Well, pleasure's on my side. And please, everybody out there, check out Doug's book. We're going to be putting the link in the show notes as well. And yeah, he has a beautiful Substack. I can recommend it. Very inspiring writing. So thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you, Julia.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in and listening. If you found some inspiration in today's conversation, then please hit the like button or comment and let us know what your aha moments were. Thank you so much. I'll see you next time.